It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Welcome to Fresh Oil. I'm so glad you joined me for the program. Today we come to the final program in our series, The Names He Carries. And I have to tell you, I saved this one for last on purpose, because this name is the one that ties everything else together. It is the name that puts a roof on the house we have been building all week. And I believe that when you hear it, when you really hear it and let it sink in, it is going to change the way you face everything that is still in front of you. But let me take you back through the week first, because I want you to feel the full weight of where we have been. We started with Jehovah Jireh, the Lord your provider, the God who sees your need before you do and was working on the provision before you even knew you had a need. We found that name on a mountain in Moriah, where a father laid his son on an altar and a ram appeared in a thicket at exactly the right moment. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Then we looked at Jehovah Rapha, the Lord your healer, the God who revealed himself as healer at Marah, at the bitter spring, in the place of thirst and disappointment, the one who turns bitter water sweet and who heals bodies and emotions and relationships and dried up souls, the healer who has never lost a case. Then Jehovah Nissi, the Lord your banner in the battle, the fixed rallying point in the chaos of your warfare, the one who is high and lifted up regardless of how tired you are. Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' arms, the banner that never comes down. And last time, Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace. Not the peace that the world gives, the peace that depends on circumstances being resolved and enemies being defeated and everything being in order. The peace that passes understanding. The peace that God spoke to a terrified man hiding in a winepress before the battle was even fought. Peace that makes no sense. Peace that is a person. And today, Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there. To find this name, we go to the very last verse of the book of Ezekiel. And the context is important, so stay with me for a moment. The book of Ezekiel is one of the most complex and sometimes difficult books in the entire Bible. Ezekiel was a prophet, a priest actually, carried into exile in Babylon along with thousands of his fellow Israelites when Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. And Ezekiel watched from Babylon as the worst thing that could ever happen to Israel happened. The temple, the house of God, the place where the glory of the Lord dwelt among his people, was destroyed, burned to the ground. The sacred place where heaven and earth met, where the presence of God rested between the cherubim, where the sacrifices were offered and the feast were celebrated, and generations of God's people had come to meet with him, gone. And the deepest grief was not the building. Buildings can be rebuilt. The deepest grief was what the building represented. The presence of God among his people. And Ezekiel had watched in a vision one of the most heartbreaking passages in the Old Testament as the glory of the Lord departed from the temple. Step by step, stage by stage, the presence lifted. From the inner sanctuary to the threshold. From the threshold to the east gate. From the east gate to the mountain east of the city. and then gone. The Shekinah glory that had filled the temple at its dedication, that had been the defining reality of Israel's identity as a people, lifted and departed. And I want you to feel what that meant for a nation whose whole identity was built around the statement that God dwells among us. The departure of the glory was not just a theological problem, it was an existential crisis. It meant we are on our own. The God who set us apart from every other nation on earth, the God whose presence in our midst was the one thing the nations around us did not have. He has left the building. And the people were in Babylon, far from home, sitting beside foreign rivers and weeping, hanging their harps on the willow trees, because they could not sing the Lord's song in a strange land. But here is the thing about Ezekiel that makes him one of the great prophets. He is also the prophet of the great return. God gives him the vision of the valley of dry bones, one of the most extraordinary passages in all of Scripture. A valley full of bones, dry bones, not just dead, completely desiccated. All the moisture of life long gone. No possibility of recovery by any natural means. And God asked Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" And Ezekiel, to his credit, gives the only honest answer available to him. He says, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." And God says, "Prophesy to these bones. Speak life over what looks completely dead." And Ezekiel does. And there is a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones come together, bone to bone, and flesh comes on them, and skin covers them, and then the breath comes, and they stand up, a vast army. What was completely dead, completely dry, completely beyond any natural hope of recovery, filled with the breath of God and standing on its feet. That is who Ezekiel's God is. That is the God behind the name Jehovah Shammah, the God who is present even in the valley of dry bones, the God who shows up in the place of death and dryness and speaks life into what everyone else had written off. The God who was in Babylon the whole time the people thought he had abandoned them. The God who never actually left, even when the visible glory departed. And at the very end of his book, after 48 chapters of judgment and exile and the hard road of consequences, Ezekiel has a vision of full restoration. A new temple, a new city, a new beginning, the glory returning, the presence coming back, everything that was lost being restored, and more. And the very last thing Ezekiel says, the final word of his entire prophetic ministry, the last name he gives to the city in his vision is this: "And the name of the city from that time on will be, the Lord is there." Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is there. That is the last word of Ezekiel. Not a theological argument, not a doctrinal statement, not a list of rules or requirements or conditions, just a name. A name that says, wherever this city is, he is there. Whatever this place is, he is present in it. The glory that departed has returned, and it will not depart again. Now, I want to think about that name with you today because I think it speaks to one of the deepest fears of the human heart. And that fear is the fear of abandonment. The fear that at some point, at some level of failure, some depth of sin, some degree of distance, God is going to leave. That there is a point past which he will not follow. A place too dark, too broken, too far gone for His presence to remain. And Jehovah Shammah says, no, there is no such place. Now let me take you to the New Testament for a moment, because I want to show you where this name finds its ultimate fulfillment. John chapter 1, verse 14. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. The Greek word translated made His dwelling is a word that means literally to tabernacle, to pitch a tent. The same word that was used for the tabernacle in the wilderness, the portable dwelling place of God among His people. John is saying Jesus is the ultimate Jehovah Shammah. The Lord is there, God Himself in human flesh, walking on human roads, touching human disease, eating at human tables, weeping at human graves. God is there. Emmanuel, God with us. And then Jesus, on the night before He died, promises something that takes Jehovah Shammah to a whole new level entirely. He says, I will ask the Father, and He will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. And then He says this, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. I will not leave you as orphans. That is Jehovah Shammah, spoken by the Son of God to the people He loves. I am not going to leave you alone. I am not going to disappear. I am not going to be present with you for a season and then withdraw when the season gets hard. The Spirit I am sending, He will be with you forever, not temporarily, not conditionally, forever. That is the promise. And I want to ask you today, are you living in the reality of that promise? Not just knowing it as a doctrine, living in it, actually experiencing the awareness that you are never alone, that whatever room you walk into, He is already there. Whatever situation you are facing, He arrived before you did. Whatever dark place you are walking through right now, His presence fills it even when you cannot feel it. Jehovah Shammah is there. Now let me bring this all the way down to where you live today. I want you to think about the situation you are most afraid of right now, the thing you are dreading, the conversation you have been putting off, the diagnosis you are waiting on, the relationship that is fracturing, the future that feels uncertain and dark, the place you are going to have to walk into that you do not feel ready for and cannot see your way through. Jehovah Shammah says He is already there. Before you get there, He is there. Before the conversation happens, He is in that room. Before the appointment, He is in that office. Before you have to face whatever you are most afraid of facing, He has already gone ahead, and He is waiting for you there. You will not arrive at any situation and find yourself alone. You cannot get there before Him. He is always already there. That is the name that ties the whole week together. Jehovah Jireh, He sees your need and provides. Jehovah Rapha, He heals what is broken. Jehovah Nisi, He is your banner in the battle. Jehovah Shalom, He is your peace in the storm. And Jehovah Shammah, He is already in every situation you are going to face before you arrive.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.